you know you really love history? When it stirs up fiery passion, when it makes you excited over teeny details that others don't even register, let alone care about, like to the point where you've read an entire book on butter, or say, the penis. When it makes you proud of what people before you endured and accomplished, and amazed that centuries of worldwide chaos, migration, violence, and injustice eventually led to an encounter between your parents that begat your own existence. But more often than not, especially as a black woman in America, even if you love it, history makes you angry. It fills you with rage when reading abominable opinions from once celebrated minds, or when you identify patterns of oppression from centuries ago. So filled with rage that you want to literally kick somebody's ass. So in this video, I'm gonna release some pent-up frustration and tell y'all all about 4 historical figures I'd love to fight. Which racist built his empire on segregation before rebranding in the 80s? Which white supremacist senator destroyed Soul City, a proposed all-black utopia in North Carolina, and got his home covered with a gigantic condom? Which former civil rights activist sold out his community for $60,000 a year? And which bigoted political scientist impacted a generation of young racists lurking in the comment sections of most of my videos? Let's go. Before I go on up,
little help?
I want to give a shout out to this video's sponsor, Adam and Eve. I'm warning you now, this video is going to piss you off. But while anger is a healthy emotion to express, so is being horny. And orgasms are awesome for boosting your stores of serotonin, or those positive feelings of well-being, especially after a long day of reading about things that piss you off. But Lexi, this is a history video. How can you mix the sacred topic of history with the raunchy topic of sex? Not only did I just mention a gigantic condom in the intro, but we wouldn't have history without sex, people. And maybe people throughout history would have been a little nicer if they had rubbed one out every once in a while, or prioritized sexual fulfillment. Yeah, I said it. What if they had access to reliable, safe, and thrilling sex toys like us in the present? I'm of course talking about the wide range of toys by Adam and Eve. For my subscribers who are always interested in pleasure, be sure to go to adamandeve.com and use my code LEXUAL for 50% off one item and free shipping on your entire order in the US and Canada. Yes, you heard that right, 50% off. Plus 20% of all profits go to fighting the spread of HIV around the world. Click the link in my description box to get shopping and tell them Lexual sent you. And now, I choose violence. These are figures of the 80s and 90s because that's where most of my research is taking place right now, but I may feel like metaphorically fighting some more bastards soon. Be sure to like this video and subscribe. Men helped facilitate and organize the pernicious rise of conservatism in the late 20th century, as detailed in episode 5 of Lexual Does the 70s, but none embodied the cause more publicly or had a more punchable face than Jerry Layman Falwell. Not to be confused with Jerry Falwell Jr., the guy who sexually harassed his Liberty University employees and who was revealed to be a cuck. I'm particularly talking about your daddy, Falwell Jr.
Your father was a swine.
Here are a few of his best quotes. On September 11th, the abortionists have got to bear some burden for this because God will not be mocked. And when we destroy 40 million little innocent babies, we make God mad. I really believe that the pagans and the abortionists and the feminists and the gays and the lesbians who are actively trying to make that an alternative lifestyle, the ACLU, People for the American Way, all of them who have tried to secularize America, I point the finger in their face and say, you helped this happen. Labor unions should study and read the Bible instead of asking for more money. When people get right with God, they are better workers. There was also the Teletubby debacle.
Teletubbies are a PBS hit with the toddler set. But the Reverend Jerry Falwell has launched a warning in the latest issue of his National Liberty Journal, telling parents Tinky Winky is gay.
No.
Parents, be very careful what your children are watching.
It's ridiculous. I've never heard such a ridiculous thing in my life. Well, unless he was gay with other toys, I don't think that Jerry Falwell has a thing to worry about.
They were accused of dumbing down the children in England.
And here in the U.S., they say Tinky Winky's gay.
Well, I think it's probably not the children who are dumbed down then.
Falwell, of course, also infamously blamed HIV/AIDS on gay people, calling it a punishment from God. There are also a long list of anti-Semitic and anti-Palestinian quotes Falwell made during his time spent penetrating and growing into American society like a cancer, but I want to focus on how he impacted me as a black woman. Long before he was a figurehead of homophobia and misogyny in the Reagan-Bush era culture war, he was cutting his teeth and building his evangelical base with unadulterated racism. He began his career as an opportunistic leader of a megachurch in the 1950s when he was in his 20s. He took an abandoned bottling plant and fashioned the Thomas Road Baptist Church in Lynchburg, Virginia. By 1958, he had a small following in and around the region. He said in a sermon, "If Chief Justice Warren and his associates had known God's word and had desired to do the Lord's will, I am quite confident that the 1954 decision would never have been made. The facility should be separate. When God has drawn a line of distinction, we should not attempt to cross that line." He made the usual declarations that integration would destroy the white race, but really revved it up in the 60s during Johnson-era proposals for civil rights legislation. His favorite target was Martin Luther King Jr., who he accused of being a communist shill, using FBI propaganda to delegitimize the civil rights movement. Like many Americans given to Red Scare panic as well as their own ignorance, it was easier to consider domestic problems as foreign imports. He said, "It is very obvious that the communists, as they do in all parts of the world, are taking advantage of a tense situation in our land and are exploiting every incident to bring about violence and bloodshed." Then Falwell did something that continues to impact our modern society. He opened one of the most well-known segregation academies in the country. Like other segregation academies founded in the wake of integration and busing, Lynchburg Christian Academy was dedicated to keeping the races separate, brainwashing white students into believing they were racially superior to everyone else, while also mixing in Christianity to make sure the racism really stuck. You know, it's easier to think you're superior to others when it's ordained by God or whatever. He wrote, "I hope to see the day when, as in the early days of our country, we won't have any public schools. The churches will have taken them over again and Christians will be running them." 5 years after he started the school, he founded Liberty University, a college that in the present is responsible for quite a bit of the swill coming from conservative think tanks, as well as the non-secular politicians filling congressional seats. After Roe v. Wade in 1973, Falwell also became a major cattle driver of evangelicals into the anti-choice pro-life movement, which was at the time almost exclusively Catholic, but only after Paul Weyrich, who I'd also love to jab in the face, rallied Falwell and other evangelical leaders pissed off about losing IRS tax-exempt status for not integrating schools into a political bloc. They did not care about abortion until it became clear that it could get voter support for a host of right-wing issues, including the right to legally discriminate against black children trying to get an education. Weyrich nudged Jerry into starting the Moral Majority, which managed to help hold down Reagan and cultivate a large base in the 1980s. This is also around the time that Falwell began toning down his racism to get a wider audience. While he rejected MLK Day in 1983,
what is the question mark?
The question mark is that so far all the records on him are sealed. And neither you, Tom, nor I really know what they're going to say.
Are you talking about his personal character,
yes,
and his personal
correct.
morality, and his personal life,
and he may
as well as any connection?
He may be as clean as Billy Graham, but we don't know that because the records are sealed.
and called anti-apartheid Bishop Desmond Tutu a phony, he no longer talked about segregating schools, and his schools began allowing non-white students to avoid paying taxes. Despite his public past as a vile racist and his outright misogyny and homophobia, he was treated with respect by presidents and still held in esteem by at least 46% of evangelicals by the early 2000s, a preview of the folks waiting to be radicalized by the right wing when social media would come crashing in a few years later. So for all of these reasons and many, many, many more, I'd love to fight Jerry Falwell. This piece of human waste, Charles Murray, gets a special shout out on this abominable list because he's still alive.
How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man?
At 78 years old and blood still flowing through his veins off of the strength of a white superiority complex, this longtime political scientist is best known for his literature that made racism scientific and welfare to blame for poverty. His 1984 book, Losing Ground, did the latter, making a New York Times reviewer describe it as a budget cutter's Bible. It influenced welfare reform at the hands of conservatives and neoliberals in the 1990s, in went hand in hand with his 1994 book, The Bell Curve: Intelligence and Class Structure in American Life, which he co-authored with Richard J. Herrnstein, a Harvard psychologist who died before the book's release. The book wasn't peer-reviewed and largely referenced work funded by the Pioneer Fund, which has often promoted scientific racism. The Pioneer Fund, by the way, was established in 1937 and came to prominence when it helped distribute a Nazi propaganda film about eugenics to churches and schools. So the research was not at all objective. Murray denies the existence of systematic racism by blaming genetics and poor black people for the injustices they encounter. He wrote, "We should care less about gaps in life outcomes between different racial groups because group differences in cognitive ability, so desperately denied for so long, can only be handled by a return to individualism. A person should not be judged as a member of a group, but as an individual." Meaning all of his books reach the same conclusion, that the best way to help the poor is by doing as little as possible. The Bell Curve even notoriously came to the conclusion that America should stop trying to improve the lives of poor children because it encourages poor, low IQ women to have more children. Even through 2021, with his most recent book, he asserts that Black Americans as a group have lower cognitive ability than white Americans, and Black Americans, again, as a group, are more criminally violent than other races and ethnicities. Bitch, talking that phrenology shit, I'll beat your ass, ho. Like you was just talking about individualism, sir. Despite his wildly racist and incorrect assertions that are just regurgitated from 19th and 20th century phrenologists and eugenicists, he is one of the most successful political scientists and nonfiction writers on the right. But his ideas are also platformed by mainstream media outlets like the New York Times and PBS. It's not surprising because while Murrayism is shocking and vile, it isn't an outlier in American politics. After all, we're one of the wealthiest nations in the world, and we offer zero cash assistance to parents, while other wealthy nations do. Furthermore, an abundance of liberal ideology and activism regarding reproductive rights hinges simply on providing birth control and abortion to poor people, but not eradicating poverty and making it easier to provide better quality of life for children. This shows that while Charles Murray deserves to get his wig split for perpetuating ideas that harm Black Americans and the poor, it shows why Charles Murray doesn't get much smoke either. This man, Jesse Helms, served as North Carolina Senator for 30 years. That's longer than I've been alive. A man who grew up in my racist home state with a racist chief of police father in the 1920s and spent the 50s helping distribute campaign flyers about desegregation saying, "Wake up white people," impacted national and local policy for longer than I have been alive. By the way, one of those flyers featured a doctored picture of an incumbent politician's wife dancing with a black man because it was so scandalous. So let's run down the list of why Jesse Helms could get these hands. He came to local prominence in North Carolina in 1953 as a Raleigh City Council member and TV commentator who attacked MLK, black people, and people on welfare, calling them born bums. Not one to be considered impartial, he served as executive director of the North Carolina Bankers Association from 1953 to 1960. The 60s were spent criticizing Vietnam War protesters, black people, and feminists. In 1970, like many white Democrats of the era, he officially switched his party registration to Republican, believing Democrats were too liberal and accommodating to black people. Did y'all know there are people who comment on this channel who don't know that Southern Democrats fled the party and reshaped the Republican platform? I know, crazy, right? So anyways, Helms wins a Senate seat in 1972. As detailed by Thomas Healy in Soul City, Race, Equality, and the Lost Dream of an American Utopia, Helms spent the 1970s blocking federal funding for a rural planned community for black Americans in North Carolina.
At Soul City, people of all ages, races, and religions can work together, play together, and learn together. Soul City, a fresh start.
Soul City was envisioned by former Corps leader Floyd McKissick to be a place for all, but one that emphasized the needs of black people and the poor, and had already received $14 million from the United States Department of Housing and Development. Though McKissick was a Republican who had won the support of Nixon for Soul City, Helms wasn't interested. He sent a telegram to McKissick saying, "I feel I should make clear that I do not favor the expenditure of taxpayer funds for the project known as Soul City, before threatening McKissick with an audit, implying that there was financial misconduct. Less than a year later, he told Floyd, "I want you to know, I'm gonna kill Soul City." Pioneers moved to the fledgling city by 1974 as workers completed water and sewer lines, roads, and started to work on an industrial center. By 1980, there were 35 housing units and a clinic and 150 people employed by the city. But Jesse Helms ran with the financial misconduct angle, which was false, until Soul City was officially shut down in 1981. There are a lot of factors that led to this, and I urge you to read that book, and maybe I'll even do content about it in the future, but the actions of racists like Helms was a major component. So what else did Helms do as North Carolina senator? He proposed legislation completely outlawing abortion and defended school prayer, and Helms was also instrumental in supporting Ronald Reagan's 1976 presidential bid. He then spent the early 80s backing Reagan's plays to support South African apartheid and Latin Americans' right-wing regimes. In 1983, he led a 16-day filibuster opposing the Martin Luther King federal holiday in the Senate. In addition to calling MLK a communist who was into action-oriented Marxism, he claimed that a federal holiday would cost the economy $12 billion a year, which was a total lie. The Congressional Budget Office estimated a cost of $18 million. Helms ended the filibuster in exchange for a new tobacco bill, and North Carolina tobacco farmers wanted lower taxes, so they got it. But there was more, wrote the Washington Post in 1983. The most immediate result was described as likely to be twofold: a boon both for Helms's fundraising among conservative whites and for anti-Helms voter registration among blacks. While many politicians were moving away from overt racism in this era, pockets of the country, like in my home state, still thrived on extreme racism, making conservatives like Helms appealing. Helms, of course, won his re-election. Continued the Washington Post. Moreover, nearly everyone agrees that there is still political profit to be gleaned from both race baiting and red baiting in North Carolina, although it is considered risky when carried to extremes. While popular among blacks, the King holiday is widely viewed as unpopular among whites in North Carolina. Speaking of the state, Helms and his wife were landlords, with properties valued at over $1.4 million. An investigation found the low-income units in disrepair, like much of the state in general. Wrote Mother Jones at the State of My Home State, just 1 year after little old me was born, only 4 states received less per capita in federal funds, only 8 have more residents living in poverty. The state currently ranks 42nd in the release of cancer-causing toxins, 43rd in manufacturing wages, and 44th in infant mortality. Senator Helms spent his time appealing to poor conservative whites with multi-million-dollar campaigns that never got landslide victories. In 5 campaigns for the Senate, Helms never won more than 55% of the vote. Despite the polarization of his constituency, his ability to out-fundraise his opponents with the National Congressional Club, a political action committee, and his constant appeals to racists, he managed to squeak by in elections with narrow victories. And plus, cheating. The Federal Election Commission penalized the National Congressional Club multiple times for illegal contributions and subsidies. After all, the PAC was founded in 1973 specifically to cover Helms's campaign debts. When AIDS research became a congressional issue, Helms was staunchly against it, saying the disease resulted from unnatural and disgusting homosexual behavior. This killed countless people, and it prompted ACT UP AIDS activists to erect a giant condom over Helms's Virginia home.
Jesse Helms has, I think, got to be one of the most evil men in America and has worked for years to do as much as he possibly can to ensure the continuance of the AIDS epidemic.
He is responsible for anti-gay legislation and also filibustering important AIDS legislation in the Senate.
You mess with us, and you're going to wake up one morning with a condom on your house.
During the 1990 United States Senate election, Helms played a role in helping the North Carolina GOP mail over 125,000 leaflets telling people they were not eligible to vote, and if they did, it would be voter fraud. These were sent almost exclusively to black voters. And then, while slightly behind in the polls against black opponent and former mayor of Charlotte, Harvey B. Gantt, good old Jesse put out this racist advertisement.
You needed that job, and you were the best qualified. But they had to give it to a minority. because of a racial quota. Is that really fair? Harvey Gantt says it is. Gantt supports Ted Kennedy's racial quota law that makes the color of your skin more important than your qualifications.
Again, Helms won. In the wake of Republican consolidation of power in the 90s under Clinton, Mother Jones wrote, "The recent GOP stampede has given Helms a respected position from which to trumpet his bitter opposition to abortion, gay rights, racial equality, arts funding, and aid to what he calls foreign rat holes." The 73-year-old was suffering from prostate cancer and high blood pressure, but he still found time to be a catalyst of hatred. When facing re-election in 1996, AFL-CIO Representative Christopher Scott said of Helms, "The biggest fear people should have is that if Helms is re-elected, he will understand that the next term would almost inevitably be his last. He will feel no constraint. He won't have to worry about political realities. It will be his final chance to shove it to those people he doesn't like." And of course, the living dead fought to live another day. He won re-election, and his name as Mr. No continued to live on. In 1996, he successfully proposed stricter sanctions against the struggling Cuba, and in 1997, he was only one of 3 senators who voted to repeal a $50 billion tax break for the tobacco industry, along with the also punchable Mitch McConnell. But you know who else is punchable? The black man and former civil rights activist who was fired by Jesse Helms for being too right-wing. James Meredith was the first black student enrolled at the University of Mississippi in 1962. A 28-year-old Air Force veteran, his appearance on campus with 24 U.S. Marshals sparked a riot that killed 2 and left hundreds injured. Until his graduation in spring 1963, he was escorted around campus with armed guard. Meredith would go on to give speeches, study political science at a university in Nigeria, and even take up law at Columbia University. In 1966, he famously conceptualized the March Against Fear, in which he would walk 225 miles across Mississippi in the sweltering June heat. He invited other black men to join him, seeking to encourage those in the Mississippi Delta to vote and not fear the threat of white violence. The newest governor of Mississippi, Paul Johnson, promised to provide state highway police protection. Even with their presence, Meredith was blasted with a shotgun by a white man named Aubrey James Norvell. This attracted over 10,000 people to the Mississippi Delta to continue the walk, many of them members of mainstream civil rights groups who didn't exactly see eye to eye with Meredith. Everyone thought he would be killed, James Farmer, the former head of CORE, said. It was complete egomania. Even still, Meredith would rejoin the march 19 days after being shot. 4,000 black people would register to vote as a result, and Meredith himself would eventually run 5 political races between 1972 and 1979. In those political races, he ran as a Republican, challenging establishment Dixiecrats like Senator James Eastland, whose 29-year streak was thanks to Mississippi embracing a one-party system and disenfranchising black voters. So far, so good, right? Well, James Meredith also owned real estate in New York and was often accused of being a slumlord and harassing his tenants. In 1967, he took out a newspaper ad in Mississippi encouraging voters to support the segregationist former governor Ross Barnett, the same man who had tried on several occasions to ban Meredith from being enrolled at Ole Miss. Barnett's 4th place loss showed how unpopular the former governor was, so it's absolutely wild that Meredith had come to support him. In 1982, he would even claim that Ross Barnett was a very brilliant man who safeguarded the whole state of Mississippi. That same year, Barnett, 84 at the time, mentioned in an interview that he had just read a book about the skulls of blacks being not quite able to hold what the skull of a white man's can hold, showing he was still the same old racist trash. So already you're seeing why Meredith could get the hands. But I'm not done. He mysteriously started a church/tax haven called the Reunification Church Under God, which had no buildings and held no religious services. On a Cincinnati call-in radio show in the 80s, he claimed that he wouldn't have signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964 had he been in Congress, and even claimed he'd like to see avowed segregationist George Wallace or Lester Maddox serve on the city council. In 1988, when asked about his role in the movement by a black co-ed at Webster University in St. Louis, he said, "I have never participated in any of that. In fact, I I always considered that below my dignity. You understand that? I have never protested anyone. You understand? No one is big enough for me to protest. After years of investing his money into real estate, investment banking, restaurants, electronics repair, cosmetics, farming, and other endeavors, even once bragging in 1985 that his personal net worth was $900,000, family health problems and legal problems, a son with lupus and another son facing manslaughter and DUI charges, Meredith decided to go full sellout. In 1989, he sent a letter to each member of Congress saying, "If God sees fit to allow me longevity and good health, I will be in the future the most important black leader in America and the world. We need to know each other." The only congressman he heard back from was the aforementioned Jesse Helms. For a reported annual salary of $30,000 or $66,000 in today's money, Meredith worked for the avowed racist and segregationists, and on the side went around touring universities claiming that his enemy was no longer white supremacists, but white liberals. Wildly, by 1991, he was no longer working for Helms, claiming that he quit because Helms was too liberal. But this was a lie. Helms had actually fired Meredith because of his support for legendary KKK leader and Louisiana House Representative David Duke. You know, that guy with the punchable face who was running to be governor of Louisiana in 1991. Just a month after being fired, Meredith went public with his support of David Duke, claiming Duke believes, and I do too, that there are millions of whites in this country who have been denied their opportunity at the American dream. Meredith rationalized his thoughts in an interview with the LA Times that the liberal agenda of the elite ruling class, which pigeonholes African Americans, Latinos, women, and gays into the same category, and weakens rather than emboldens each group politically. Sounds like a hotep to me. He then went on to applaud George Bush for vetoing the Civil Rights Act of 1990, claiming that its primary goal was helping women, gays, and Latinos, and not black people. Like Charles Murray, James Meredith is still alive. I wonder how he'll be eulogized or sanitized when his death comes. So those are just 4 of many historical figures I'd love to fight. Don't be salty. I mean, are you gonna kick my ass because you ain't like this list? I bet you not. So be sure to look out for future editions. And in the meantime, tell me in the comments who you'd want to fight and why. Thank you for watching.